Hello and welcome to In Service to Transformation with me, your host, Claire Darnell. Very happy today to be joined by Karen Johnston. Karen is a social worker who specialises in training consultancy within that field and has also progressed into facilitating treats, setting up retreats that are deeply impactful to women who are seeking restoration and change, I would say, as a personal recipient. And she also works one-to-one with women who've been through a lot. Now, I'm not going to try and explain what that all means, but what I am going to do is introduce you to Karen. So, hi, Karen. It's lovely to have you here.
So nice to be here, Claire. Thank you for having me.
Oh, lovely. So I'm keen to, dive deep with you and find out a little bit more about you. I've known you for a few years. I've attended your retreats. They've been really impactful. You've shared some pieces of your story with me and with some of the women on the retreats, as we do. But yeah, it'd be really nice to spend the next hour or so really understanding a little bit more about what it is that brought you to be in service to transformation in these fields that you find yourself in. I usually find the place that I like to start is when you had that moment, that aha moment, or that pivotal time where you realized, I need transformation, I need change. There's something that I would like, that I would like to focus on changing here. Now, for some people, they've shared that that's a big bang. For others, it's a gradual, slow coming to realize. What's your journey been like?
Yeah, I think it was a series of little moments where I realised that I wasn't really cut out for a life of crime and debauchery. Like, I just wasn't really cut out for it. I can remember having a moment where I'd driven up to London to do something with someone that was a lot older than me, a lot older man. I was involved in stuff that would have got me a lengthy prison sentence, and I had a moment of clarity in Peckham where we were getting chased by people and I had to get in the car and drive. So I was like the getaway driver. I was 19 and I was completely ill-equipped for this life that I'd ended up in. And I'd still ended up in it. And I would have these moments where I'd be like, what the fuck are you doing here? That how the fuck have you ended up in this situation? And feeling just that I had no business being there, but I was there. I had another moment in Thailand where we'd done something really silly and got involved with people that were much more dangerous than anyone I'd ever met. And again, I was like, you are in a really fucking high risk situation and you have no business being here. I don't think any human beings have any business being in those situations. And that's the bottom line. I think that, after a while, we become so desensitized to high risk situations that we normalize them. But I always had this little part of me that was going, get yourself out of this fucking situation. It's not safe. Am I allowed to swear, by the way?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Swearing.
We'd be in trouble if we couldn't because the air's blue around me. Go on. You're
Yeah.
not effing safe. Yeah.
So a lot of those moments, I was very young when I was introduced, or I was, introduced. I found myself in a world that involved high risk behavior and crime and much older people, and and exploitation, but I didn't perceive it to be that at the time. I didn't perceive that I was being exploited. I thought that I was actively entering into these situations. But these days there's there's names for all these kinds of things. But back then I didn't have the language for what was happening. It was just my life had gone this way and I was ill-equipped to deal with the risks that I found myself in repeatedly.
Yeah. So there's a few things there. I mean, would love to take a step back and understand what led you to be making these choices or finding yourselves in these positions where you could be exploited if you're happy to go there. But
Yeah.
really, the piece that stood out was, that little voice that we have, that's that kind of deeper knowing of get out of here, that exists within all of us. Sometimes it's really quiet, but it was there, right? All from the beginning. What do you call that piece of you now that you're more connected with the fact that it exists?
Sense, I call it.
Yeah,
In intuition, wisdom,
yeah,
like
yeah,
a higher self part of
yeah,
me. But it was just common sense that I shouldn't be there,
yeah.
really, Claire. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't even like it was just like, "No, you should be it. You're not
Mm.
equipped for this."
It's just that deeper knowing that, yeah,
Yeah.
this is not the way, Karen.
Yeah.
So what led you to end up in these situations? Obviously, share as much as you're comfortable with.
Yeah, I mean, on paper, I shouldn't have been there. I went to an all-girls grammar school, which
Mm,
down here is, you do your 11 plus. If you pass, you go to the grammar school. So I was surrounded by girls who were really bright and had their life path mapped out for them, which was A levels, university, law, medicine, these kind of
mm,
things. Yeah. And I was just very I was always just opposed to that, having my life mapped out for me. Like there was something inherent in me that was like, no, I'm not going down that path. Don't know why. It was like a rebelliousness in me. And that coupled with growing up in a family where I I would I don't even know how to describe my upbringing really. Um, it was complicated. And
mm,
um, I my family broke down when I was 15. My dad had another affair and my mum had a breakdown, and I was behaving as 15-year-olds do. I'd already started experimenting, but I was yeah, I was experimenting with all kinds of things at that point, and my mum couldn't really deal with me. And so I
mm,
left. I did my GCSEs and I left home that summer.
mm.
And I was living in a bedsit in an area down here where there's quite a lot of drug use. So I was too young,
Yeah.
no protection, estranged from my family, but also um, broken in terms of self identity and self worth. Like I just didn't have a sense of who I was and whether or not who I was good, whether I was a
Mm,
good person. I always kind of felt that I wasn't. And yeah, but I was incredibly vulnerable. When I look back now, I just think actually now that I would hope there would be some more wraparound support for a young girl in the position that I was in.
mm,
But there wasn't back then. And so when you're on your own trying to survive with no money, you make choices that
yeah.
are, or I made choices. Not everybody makes those choices.
Mm.
Some people go to work. I did go to work as well, but I always had to supplement my income with behavior that was really high risk, or I always felt like that was, what I needed to do to survive.
Yeah. Yeah. I really identify something about, well, and this might be projection from me and from my own experience, but there's almost something about that having to survive, and that self-sufficiency that kicks in causes us then to be responsible for ourselves and just make choices reactively. And then we find ourselves in these situations where we think we're really adult, we think we're
Yeah.
making these really composed, worldly decisions, but really we're just so lost, aren't we? For me, I was just very similar, left home at 16 and found myself having to pay rent and having to supplement my income through other means. And yeah, some of those means seem easier at the time, or they're made to look a lot easier. So you said that you were exploited previously and you fell
Yeah.
in with um I guess you fell in with people that were encouraging you to maneuver into these parts of your story or into parts of your experiences. So, oh, I'm quite keen to roll forward and just say, reflecting back, how has it shaped? I know you're, if I may, I know you're a parent. How has it shaped your experience as a parent now in terms of how you've changed things?
Gosh, my boys have had such a different experience, you know, and that's not because I have parented exceptionally. I've been a single mum, you know, I've done my best, and sometimes my best was not good enough, and that is a fact. That's not me beating myself up. But what they've had is at least one secure, stable person that has not let go of them, even when they have been, you know, going through their own journeys. I don't know how I actually look at my boys and don't know how they are like they are, Claire. It's a bit of a freaking miracle, you know, but it's different because, yeah, they're protected. They've been protected through that, very vulnerable. I think 16 to 18 is so vulnerable. And actually, no one of that age has any business living by themselves without, you know, safety and protection. It's such a vulnerable time. So I don't have any, I really do not sit here professing to know how it's turned out differently for them. Part of that is just miracle, I think.
And presence, right? Just being present for them and creating that safety. Yeah. So you found yourself in these situations. There you are, out there, car chases and runaway driving and all of these crazy things. What happened next? You're having these mini epiphanies, as I would call them, yeah? Little boys.
I mean, I was very lucky because where I now live as well, I've moved back to in Bournemouth, there's a lot of addiction, but there was also a lot of support for addiction down here in the 90s. And I knew that lots of people had gone into these places called rehabs. And I knew at this point, by the time it got to the end of that period of my life, I knew that I couldn't stop in the community. I'd gone to see a drugs counsellor, and I'm so grateful that she did this. She just said to me, I can't work with you, which was a bit disappointing at the time, but she said, your addiction is too progressed for me to be able to support you in the community. And I always was so grateful to her, because if she had tried to work with me and kept me in the community, I might still be there, Claire. You know, her saying, I can't help you because your needs are too high for me, was a gift, a real gift. And I really remember that and have taken that into, you know, my work and the work that I've done with women. So she said, you need to go into treatment. I made a call to social services, as it was at the time, because it had to be a social work team. And I had this gorgeous woman who was, she was like older than my mum, so she seemed like a really maternal figure, who came out to my house and assessed me. And I can remember saying to her, Audrey, I'm not really that bad, you know, it's not am I bad enough, like am I unwell enough to get funding? Because comparatively, a lot of things hadn't happened to me that had happened to a lot of people that I was, you know, spending time with. And she just looked at me with a like look of, bless you, Karen. I was, you know, like malnourished, not functioning, not able to go to work, physically, mentally, spiritually, completely empty. And and so she organized funding for me to go into treatment. And I, you know, she was a really pivotal person in my life, and part of the reason that I went on to do social work and to work and do the kind of assessment process of women, because her assessment was the first, when she sat down and assessed me, it was the first time I'd sort of told my story to another human being, and she'd validated me, but also she'd reflected back how high risk what I was doing was, and kind of broke
Yes.
my denial around,
Mm.
like, you shouldn't be living like this. She was like, this is not okay that you're experiencing this. And it was
Mm.
like a level of care, but also a level of yeah, like denial breaking that
Yeah.
I'd never experienced. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? She didn't say, oh yeah, you know, you need to just carry on for a bit longer until you're really fucked and then we'll give you some money. She was like, no,
Yeah.
you need to
You
get out of here
qualify.
now. You qualify. Yeah, you need to get out of here now. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Oh, what a blessing. Both of those women, right? The one who's, yeah, absolutely understood where her boundaries and limitations were and had the capacity to actually say, I cannot serve you. What a transformational gift that is. And then ultimately the individual who really, what it is to be witnessed, what it is to be held, to be understood, but also with boundaried love. So no,
Mm.
your delusion has to stop here. This is where it stops. I'm going to tell you about, and that both of those great role modeling, right, for the kind of leaders we can become in the future. Mm. So your denial was broken, your delusion bubbles burst, and where do you go next? What happens next?
So I had to wait for a while, and it was that last 3 months before I got my date. They said to me, you need to ring up the rehab every day, see if there's a cancellation, and there just wasn't, and it was just, and I was getting more and more and more unwell. So I was really unwell by the time I got in there,
And were you still
and
actively using drugs and having
yeah,
to
like
maintain your lifestyle?
yeah, every day. And I'd been working, I'd had jobs, you know, and I was working right up until that last 3 months, and I just couldn't even go into work.
Mm.
I was sick every day. Yeah. So I went into rehab. I hated every minute of it. I couldn't hold a conversation when I got in there. I was the youngest person in there, and I couldn't speak. People would be asking me to talk about my life, and I'd grown up in an environment where you don't speak about what's going on. You don't trust anybody. You don't feel, you know, they were the sort of unspoken rules in my family. So to be sat in group therapy being asked to talk about how I was feeling and what was going on for me was the most alien thing in the world. And I felt so exposed. And then they gave me this book called Why Am I Afraid to Tell You Who I Am? And I hated them. I know, it was
Mm.
really shaming, because
Mm.
I didn't understand why I couldn't tell you who I was. I just couldn't, you know, I couldn't, because I felt so vulnerable, and I felt so full of shame, and I didn't want anybody to know who I was. And because I didn't know who I was myself. So how the fuck
Yeah.
can you articulate that, you know? I found the whole thing really difficult,
Yeah.
and actually quite traumatic. And you
The
know,
whole
and that's,
rehabilitation
yeah,
process.
the
Yeah.
first part of it, the detox, you know, being up all night, just sitting there, just wishing the hours away, and feeling so physically unwell, and yeah, and just not feeling particularly safe, not feeling like I had that many people in my corner. I had no visits, my family didn't know I was in there.
Mm.
I was very socially isolated at that point. Like, you know, my sister knew I was in there, my younger sister, but no one else knew where I was. My mum thought I'd gone to London to work. Like, it was
Yeah.
just, and
Wow.
I was in rehab, you know. And
Mm.
I can remember them getting me to do the next of kin, and me saying I don't have any, and they were like, Karen, you're the youngest person in here, how have you not got a next of kin? And I was like, I don't, because I don't, nobody knows I'm here. So
Mm.
I was very young and very responsible for myself, you know.
Yes.
Yeah, just, it was a lot. It was a lot. So I was there for 6 weeks, and then thank God Audrey, my lovely social worker, came up and assessed me. And I was like, right, I want to go here, because there was this guy that I fancied, that I knew was in rehab, and she was like, no fucking way. But she didn't swear, because she was more polite than me, but she was like, you are not going there. You are going to an all-women facility in Bristol. And she was very prescriptive about that.
Mm.
Well, there was a facility in London, actually. I could be assessed at both the women's places, somewhere in Clapham and somewhere in Bristol. And I was absolutely devastated, because the only way I was kind of getting through that part was because I could, men would take care of me, you know, and look out for me. And yeah, the thought of going on being in an all-female environment was absolutely terrifying. But Audrey knew what I needed, and she said, I'm not funding you to go anywhere that is not all female.
Go on, Audrey.
Yeah, go on, Audrey. I know. She influenced so much of like what came after that, in terms of like the conversations I've had with women, which is, you're not going there. We're not even arguing about this, you know?
Yeah.
Because she wasn't arguing with me. She was like, I'm not wasting money on your treatment. I want you to succeed. And you will not succeed in a mixed environment. She said, her words were, you will get eaten for breakfast, Karen, by these older people, men. You know?
Who clearly would have been around the block a bit, and predatory behaviour exists in these environments, and
and some really good people.
Everyone's looking for connection, right, and comfort in this time of complete upheaval. So relationships are inevitable in these rehabilitation services.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's not me demonizing all men that were in there, you know, but I was a very young, vulnerable girl. So she made the right call. So then I went to Bristol. I went and had an assessment at this house, and I don't know what happened, but I experienced, the lady that ran it at the time, I experienced this sense of safety and kindness that I hadn't experienced before. It was just a felt sense of, this is a good place, and people here have my best interests at heart. And I'd never been to Bristol, didn't know anybody in Bristol, and just, that was a kind of blind faith moment of, I'm just going to go with this. And I was there for 6 months, and that experience changed my life. That you know, it's that women only environment that set me up for what was to come.
Absolutely. I really identify as well with that. I don't know, I didn't get to go to rehab. I remember in the early days of my addiction actually being really resentful about people who got to go to rehab, because I was like, I'm having to juggle my whole life here and get clean. This is like the hardest thing I've ever done, until I went in and did service in a rehab and realised how difficult it is to be in that environment, how challenging it is for the people who are being rehabilitated, the different personalities and processes that are unfolding amongst one another. And I no longer held that resentment at that point. I realised how lucky I was to get clean in the comfort of, you know, my partner was super supportive at the time. He allowed me to go out to meetings, 3 meetings a day if I needed to. I had complete freedom to get myself clean in the that whole rehabilitation process, it's a godsend, right? And it's a challenge.
Such a challenge. I wanted to leave every day, you know, but I also knew where was I going to go? I didn't, you know, well, I was going to go to the area of Bristol where everyone uses drugs, which was, you know, a whole nother world that I you know, I ended up working in that area, and I would have got eaten alive. I would have done. I wasn't, again, like, I'm just not equipped.
So you're really young at this stage, right? So you're 19 when this process starts, and I guess you would have been about 20 by the time you're coming.
21. I had my 22nd birthday in treatment.
Wow. That's, you know, one could argue that that's really young to be one, for you to have escalated to that point in terms of these experiences you were having, and then also to have found recovery. Can you explain to us all where you went from there? What unfolded for you after that experience of getting clean?
I just sort of bounced around for a while, still doing whatever I needed to do to survive. You know, I didn't come in and be like, you know, a responsible, productive human being straight away. And then I got pregnant a couple of years into recovery, and that was a real turning point for me. I knew I wasn't with my son's dad. We weren't in a long-term relationship. I knew from the minute that I knew that I was pregnant that this child was meant to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I was homeless. I was sleeping on my friend's sofa. It was not ideal circumstances to be making a decision about bringing a child into the world. And there was still something in me that knew that it was the right thing.
Mm.
And then when I had my first son, I just knew that I needed to change the way that I was living, because I didn't want to bring that level of risk to his life.
Mm.
And so that looked like going back into education, because I really wanted to study.
Mm.
I love studying, and so I went back to college when he was 9 months, and I did an access to higher education course.
Yeah.
And then I got a place through a widening participation scheme at Bristol Uni, which is a really it's a really ridiculously, like, all the kids there have been to public school. Yeah, no
Yeah.
kids had come from my background. Anyway, I was like the token single mum on benefits that got
Yeah.
into Bristol Uni
Wow.
on this widening participation scheme. And I did a degree in social policy, which I absolutely loved. And I
Mm.
started to get really educated in how governments address social issues. So all of the things that I studied were, things around substance misuse, domestic violence, homelessness, crime, criminality, gang culture, like internationally and in the UK, and did this real comparative work around how different governments dealt with different social issues. So I've
Mm.
always been fascinated, not just at the kind of how an individual navigates their way through life and
Yes.
gets to a point where they're going to be able to live a different life if that's what they want, but also how systems do and don't support that.
Yeah.
So I was fascinated in that, and we know that systems are set up not to support the most marginalised and most vulnerable so much of the time. But that period of education, I had some amazing lecturers who really looked out for me, who just really supported me. And I started voluntary work during that period. So I was volunteering at the Sex Work Project, so the project that did outreach to women in the sex industry.
Mm.
So I'd go out and do outreach while I was studying. And my dissertation, my final year dissertation, was the needs of women in the street sex market in Bristol. Like, what
Wow.
were their needs, and how could systems support
Mm.
them to exit street sex work?
Mm.
So it was like this whole thing all came together,
Yeah.
in quite early recovery. So yeah, I graduated, and and I did really well, Claire.
I love that. Yeah, of
I
course you
know.
did.
I did it because I loved it, and it
Yeah.
was the first time I'd seen something through, and I kind of had that sense of self-belief that if I applied myself to something and I
Yes.
really cared about it, and that was what was really important. Like, I knew that I had to really care about what I was doing in order to apply myself. But if those two things came together, there was like magic in that. Do you know what I
Mm.
mean? Like, so I really cared about what I was writing about. I really cared about, you know, how we could support really vulnerable people, because people can't just make better choices. The systems
Yeah.
need to be in place to enable that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I did that. Then I then I got pregnant. Then I was pregnant actually when I graduated, and it was another kind of relationship that wasn't going to go the distance.
Mm.
And I that summer I applied to do an MSc in social work, and I went back to do that when Samuel, my youngest, was 7 months. So I had a
Mm.
7-year-old, a 7-month-old baby. I was a single mum living in social housing, and I went and did a master's in social work whilst working
Insane.
in the field.
Love that.
Mad.
Well, it's pure devotion to your purpose, isn't it? That's how I'm receiving it. You knew you could make a difference. You're pulling on all of the threads of your own experience, and you've just applied all of those pieces and threads to weave this new way of existing in a world within a system that has failed you, making a difference. What a beautiful gift. And
Yeah, I was,
crazy
yeah.
devotional, because like to do that with one child, let alone go through a pregnancy term and then have a 7-month-old, then go back and do a master's. What a super smart human.
Well, I mean, I'm super grateful that there was the support in place at that time. You know, this was the early
Yes.
2000s
Very
to
different.
actually a very different time. You know, that I had an NHS bursary to do my master's.
Yeah.
His childcare was subsidised. You know, there's no way that someone in my position would
Yeah.
have would probably be able to do that now.
100%. Absolutely no. They've stripped back all funding and support for all studies for people who are marginalised, and
Yeah,
education systems are not set up for people like you and I to
no, they're
be
not.
able to access education. Yeah.
No, and the level of debt that I would be in now would be
Mm-hmm.
next level. You know, my son went through uni, so I know the level of
Yes.
student loan that's had to happen there. And
Mm.
yeah, but so yeah, super grateful that I was of that time and able to do that.
Mm.
And but it was a drive to like provide my kids with you know, a kind of level of security that they hadn't had either. And I knew that
Mm.
by getting educated and going into the social work field, I would at least be able to pay the rent and feed
Yes.
them.
Mm. Amazing. So you sat your masters, and then I have no doubt you came out with flying colours.
I did do as well in my master's.
Oh, how annoying.
It was really
I mean,
hard.
only juggling 2 kids and work.
Yeah, it was really that was really hard. Like Sam was 2.5 by the time I graduated, and it was like, actually, I think I look at that period of my parenting and think you know, that's the bit where I think the boys didn't have me.
Yeah.
You know,
It's
that part.
it really conjures up, this whole experience of, oh, you can have it all, and actually it's really tough to fucking have it all. It's another part of a system, I think, that convinces women that we can, have a career, have a home life, and juggle it all. And actually my experience was quite the opposite. I've missed out on great swaths of my daughter's life where I've had to hand her over to childminders,
Mm,
childcare facilities, and loved ones in order to go to work, which is such a colonial freaking concept anyway, right? It's just abandon your children and go to work. Oh,
I know,
don't get me
and
started on that.
yeah. But and also as a single one, what it kind of created for me, which was a really beautiful byproduct, was that I had to create relationships with other women that were in a similar situation. So I had this really amazing sisterhood of other single mums that
Mm,
whose kids were in school, and we used to share childcare. And yeah, I met some amazing women who
mm,
really took care of my children, and I took care of their children, and
stunning.
we raised each other's kids
And
some
it
days,
takes a
you know.
village to raise a child, right? That's how the
Yeah,
saying goes. I love that.
yeah, I was really
Yeah.
lucky. Bristol is a really beautiful place,
Yes.
and a great sense of care and community that I
Mm,
hadn't experienced. And I'm, yeah, so grateful that I did it
mm,
there, this part of my journey.
yeah. So this sounds, if we think about the journey of personal transformation, obviously you've been riding this wave for a really long time and also giving back and already being of service to others throughout. What are the pieces, or what this is, a lot of this is focused on your social work. Are there other areas that you started to venture into in terms of your own personal healing journey outside of the realms of your social work?
I mean, for the first sort of 10 years probably of my recovery, it was about just having a career and providing for the
Mm,
kids. And, you know, I think I was lucky in a way that because I couldn't get out to like peer support groups and recovery groups as much
mm,
as some people, I learned to read books that would
right.
educate and support me. And I really think I'm so, again, at the time I was like, everyone else can get out and do this, and I'm stuck in here. And I can remember, you know, like all the kind of like New Year's Eve parties, and
Yeah.
I would be stuck in, I wasn't going anywhere. But it was
Mm,
like I read lots of books, I was really into philosophy. I was really into like other other ways of seeing the world. Like I was
Mm.
fascinated, and so I read loads. I was like a real reader of
Yeah.
other ways of healing my
Mm.
life, essentially, and healing my heart, and working out how I could feel okay about myself, because I
Mm.
still didn't for a lot of years, you know, even though I was getting the kind of external things in place, I still felt pretty broken because I didn't have a reference point inside of me for what love and kindness and reassurance and comfort sounded like. I didn't have that voice for a
Yes.
long time. I have had to create that voice, and I've had to learn how to create that voice.
Mm.
So yeah, I think that the all of the work that came after in terms of supporting other women to heal came from me sitting in my flat by myself, knowing that I couldn't get this information in the sort of traditional places at that time because
Yes.
they weren't accessible to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, are there any books that you read back then, any authors or teachers, you know, that have written books that really stayed with you that you would recommend to others?
The thing is, I think they were of their time, and now I see
Things
issues
move
with those
on.
teachings. Do you know what I
Oh, yeah, I know
mean?
that one.
So,
Yeah.
there were books that I was like, oh, at that time. I tell you, I mean, Melody Beattie, who has
Yeah.
written all the stuff around codependency, Pia Melody, who also has written a whole body of work around codependency healing.
Mm.
It was like I had to sort of branch out of the
Yes.
traditional addiction recovery space.
Mm.
Um, there was an author called Susan Jeffers who wrote a book called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway.
Yes.
But I have an issue with that phrase now. But but at the time it was really supportive to me. It was
Yeah.
like, how can you just widen your experience a little bit? And what does it feel like to put yourself out of your comfort zone?
Mm.
Yeah, I read all of those books that were of their time. And now I'm like,
Yes.
okay, now with more information, I can see that that isn't entirely helpful, and there's another
Mm.
layer to that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, because I'm guessing as you've progressed in your learning, your understanding, and deepening your work, you've understood more around nervous system responses and how actually sometimes it's not possible for us to just feel the fear and do it anyway,
No.
right?
Yes.
That
Like
just isn't going to
jump and the
biologically
net. No.
impossible.
Yeah, like jump and the net will catch you and all that. I'm not one for pushing myself into anything that doesn't feel safe. I'm a
Yeah.
very right, we go gently, and
Mm.
that experience of having or tasting something new is a really titrated experience, because you can't rush the nervous system. You can't rush
Yes.
it. Anything that is like bang, bang, it doesn't work for me.
Mm.
Intensity doesn't work for me. Like big things, like big experiences, they don't work for me. My nervous system will just contract and shut down and go, I'm not taking it. There's no way. That it is a physiological thing to anything that feels too intense. So
Yeah.
I've had to go really gently with my own little heart and body and nervous system, because it's really protected. And
Mm.
it's not coming, I'm not coming out of here. I'm
Yeah.
all right in here.
Yeah.
You would have to really convince me to come, because I'm safe in here in
Yeah.
this skin, in this body now, you
Yes.
know. But
With all of your coping mechanisms, right? Just
yeah,
nestled. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm happy in here with me, like I
Mm.
get on with me these
Yeah.
days. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, I mean, I've learned loads. I started yoga when I was pregnant with Sam. That was a real turning
Mm.
point for me, because I went to a active birth pregnancy yoga class. Everyone
Yeah.
there was like in a relationship with their partner. I was like, again, the only single mum. It's like all the partners were coming and doing massage, and the
Oh God,
teacher had
yeah.
to come and do it on me because I was on my own. But she was amazing. And like I had this whole sort of like hypnobirthing experience. I
Yeah.
had a home birth with my
Wow.
youngest. So I'd got into this, I got into this place where I knew that my body was miraculous, and if I made friends with it and I worked with it, it could do the most amazing things. And I learned
Yes.
that, I feel like that pregnancy yoga, and then having that physical practice for me, it's 18 years I've had that. That's been a big part of my journey, and also and then learning that actually, oh, you can re-traumatize people even in that field, and learning to do like so I've trained as a yoga teacher, and then I trained as a trauma-informed yoga teacher because it felt really necessary to have another layer to that, because not all these things work for everybody, and they're not, you know, they're not there is not one size fits all. Like, that's what I know more than anything, is that it's so individual. What works for me won't work for you. What works for someone else may make somebody else really frightened. And, you know, what we have to provide is choice for people, I think, like a lot of choice around, more choice than is actually presented around what is possible in the realm of healing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people ultimately are healing themselves, right? But you're presenting to them all of the options that are available, with it's your guidance that leads them in the way. I'm always fascinated to hear, because whenever I speak to you, I realize that you're qualified in another thing and another thing and another thing.
Yeah, I've actually stopped training now because it's like ridiculous. Yeah, I think I was a lifelong learner. So yeah, I'm a 200-hour yoga teacher, and
Crazy.
then did the trauma-informed yoga teacher training. I'm also a nervous system accredited professional. So I've done training, like, so I need, you know, I feel like it's important, if we're talking about these things, that we have a qualification in them. I mean, that's probably controversial, because people will say that lived experience is enough, but I don't think that it is. You know, I think that my social work training especially equipped me with so many skills that I didn't have, about how to really intelligently engage other people and not harm them.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because I agree with you on one hand, and then I'm also doing so much work at the moment around decolonization for myself, because of my own experience, my own journey. So having been studying these shamanic pathways for the last 2 years or so, and then realizing how this could be controversial, but how the educational system, but we can disagree and still love one another, right?
Yeah, of course.
But how the whole educational system really is set up to exclude, and I mean, you've already identified it, right? These spaces you wouldn't really be able to access today because of the lack of support and funding for people who are coming from more diverse backgrounds. But these educational settings, these qualifications, ultimately are a form of colonized structure, thinking, belief. And I think there's an element of safety that we absolutely bring through accreditation and knowledge base that's required. And I do believe there are people out there that have the lived experience and bring that wealth of experience into the arena with them, that aren't qualified, that I have sat in circle with, and I have experienced deep changes through, you know, and they would be seen as more of a bit of a left field kind of teacher or space holder, and they've been so important on my pathway.
100%, Claire. I mean,
Deeply trauma informed, you know?
yeah, but I was clueless, so I needed to fucking learn, right? Yeah, they may be much wiser and more enlightened than me. I wasn't, so I needed someone to sit me down and say, when you are trying to attunement to someone else's nervous system, it is something that I needed. I wasn't attuned to my own nervous systems. How was I going to attune to someone else's, you know? And all of the kind of work around me wanting something, especially when I was working with women in street sex work, and my job was to get those women into treatment, and sometimes I wanted that for them more than they wanted it for themselves, you know, and how harmful that is, because then what you're setting up is this dynamic where they feel like they've disappointed you or they've let you down, and that's so harmful. So, you know, the training was really useful for me to really understand like human relationships and the kind of stuff that can go on that we're quite blind to, you know, unless someone points it out. And I'm, you know, I need lots of things pointed out to me a lot of the time about the way that I operate and the way that I work, you know, by people that I trust, you know,
Yeah,
people that I trusted deeply. And my yoga teacher training she was an addiction specialist as well. So it was always like kind of related to the field of addiction recovery, trauma recovery. So,
yes,
and they just knew more than me. So I was really willing to learn from these
yeah,
people, you
100%. I
know.
love a teacher. It's so important,
Yeah,
right? To have a
yeah,
mentor, to have a teacher. I think in anyone working in this field, if not mentored, you're kind of untethered. And I just feel it's really important for us to be able to take the pieces that are coming up for us, because holding space, it's activating, right? We have to go somewhere with our stuff as well. So it's yeah, it's important for us to be held in that process. Yeah.
yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so I'm curious. We've gone down the route of, yeah, you just expanding your knowledge base, and you're, you know, accredited, capable social worker. You're changing yourself, you're changing lives outside of yourself, you're holding a family together. How did you start doing these retreats? Because was it a natural kind of, there's something, yeah, just tell me more about your retreat
Oh,
spaces.
yeah, I mean, that was in my social work job. So the first retreat I ever did was in 2006. And we took a group of teenage mums from a really deprived area of Bristol who had never really been out of that estate. We
Wow.
took them to Sheldon, which is where I run retreats.
Ah.
Yeah, and I watched, so we took them and their kids. I ran parenting courses for the mums, and there was a creche for the kids. And I watched these little kids settle in that space. There is something magical about that area of land, right, where we go and do retreats. It's why I still go there. So I've been going there for like nearly 20 years
Yeah,
with
wow.
groups of women. So it was a natural evolution of that. You know, we got funding for other groups of women. We took another group of women who I'd worked with in inner city St Paul's. We took them and their kids away again. I watched the mums settle. Like I watched this experience of, I feel safe here. I can't explain why. You know, like the setting of the place, the environment really contributed to their nervous system
Yes.
becoming coming out of survival and coming into a place of feeling safe and connected. And they couldn't explain it and articulate it, and I couldn't, but I watched it happen.
Yeah, that
You know what I mean?
co-regulation between mother and child as well, right? So mother's settled, feels safe,
Yeah,
child in turn feels safe, feels
yeah.
settled. Yeah.
They were the most magical weekends, and the women that came on them still talk to me about how amazing they, you know, because I have the absolute privilege of being in some of the women's lives that I've worked with for over 2 decades, you know, and the
Wow.
women that I worked with who were, you know, street sex working and homeless coming on my retreats, and I've picked them up from, you know, squats and crack houses, and then I'm sat in circle with them like that. The kind of that cycle of change that I've been able to witness people go through is like mind-blowing. So it's always been a thing that we took women away for residential weekends. So it was just an extension of that. It wasn't like I sat down one day and thought, oh, I'm going to just start a retreat business. It didn't
Yeah.
happen like that. It was just a natural, like, oh, okay, well, yeah. And then some of the women that had come away on a kind of more charitable basis, they were getting into recovery and starting to, and you know, have careers and money, and then they were in a position to kind of fund themselves to come. And then we always
Yeah.
had this like pay it forward bursary kind of situation where people would come who couldn't access it financially. And yeah, it was like this real, I mean, yeah, it just happened. It wasn't any
Yeah, it's so
brainchild of me.
organic,
Yeah,
right?
it
So
wasn't like I sat down and went, this is my vision for
I'm
this.
a retreat master.
Yeah.
And I love how there's just this constant thread that from when I'm listening to you sharing about how you're just in service to the thing, and then the thing becomes the thing that's in service. So it's just this devotional, constant practice of you just showing up and being in service to supporting others, and then ultimately it's able to grow. and
Yeah.
change and become what it needs to be to carry that out, that medicine out to more people. It's so beautiful to hear you speak of that, and how humbly really you that approach, how you've approached it from what I can tell, pretty good judge of character, that you've approached it humbly, but it actually has been so resonant with what's needed out there. It's just grown and it's become the thing that you're able to continue to do. I love that. That's so beautiful. How do you look after yourself in the process of juggling all of these pieces? Like, what are your go-to practices?
I mean, people ask me this a lot because people think I'm super busy and I'm always doing loads of shit. And I think actually in 2006, I was a single mum with 2 kids doing an MSc. Like this is easy breezy.
Walk in the park, baby. Yeah.
Yeah, this is like nothing, this
Mm.
part of my life, you know?
Mm.
I've got so much time.
Yeah, I
I
hear
mean,
you.
I'm so freed up. Like I would have to do like a little 5-minute yoga practice in front of the telly when one was sat in a high chair and one was,
Yeah.
you know, eating food on the sofa. It was like that's it. Now I can go to a class in the evening.
Yeah.
It's dreamy, Claire.
Totally dreamy. And I think when you're working, I know that you do work, as we said before, you work in training consultancy in the social work field, and also you're doing this one-to-one coaching and the retreat space holding. I know you've got a really active community on Facebook. I'll come to you to tell us a bit more about that. But I think ultimately, amongst all of that, there's also time, right? So I completely understand as well, and I'm nowhere, not quite as grown up as you yet, but there is this balance that I've found in that I work less than I ever have in my regular job, and I actually
Yeah,
have more space than I've ever had, but I'm so much happier. You know, going to work every day and earning all the money and doing the things is not actually what fulfills me anymore. Being in service to what people need actually is the thing that really motivates me and allows me to be in more of a flow state. So it feels way less stressful and
yeah.
busy than it should. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't feel stressful or busy at all because
Mm.
I work when I feel called to work. I mean,
Yes.
apart from like I have like a training day booked in, or I have, I do my coaching. I tend to work one-to-one on 2 days and I'm in that energy of coaching, and then
Mm.
I don't spread it out over the whole week. It's like I'm quite compartmentalized around how
Yeah.
I manage my time. But then Mondays and Fridays, I don't book anything in that's
Mm.
front facing. So then I'm not, I don't have admin people or anything like that. I do
Yeah.
everything myself. But I love the whole process of um taking care of all the different parts of it. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
The
It's like
variation. Yeah.
yeah, I really love it. And I have an incredible retreat team. I mean, I don't do
I
that
was
by
going to ask
myself.
about them. You bring lots of different aspects to the retreats. Do you want to tell us a
Yeah.
bit more about your team?
Yeah, they're just like some of the most amazing women I've ever met, that have supported the work that I've been doing from the beginning. And people watch what we do, and practitioners want to come and work on our retreat. So I get people that say, can I come and deliver this, or and have offered to do that for free because they just want to be part of
Make a
it.
difference.
And yeah, and I don't advocate, I'm not advocating free labor, because absolutely I want to pay my people really, really well.
Mm.
But yeah, because what a privilege to be able to give your gift to a community of women that may not ordinarily access it. A lot of women, as you know, Claire, that come would not step foot inside a yoga studio, but
100%.
they will
Yeah.
do yoga with us because we
Mm.
make it fun and we make it accessible. And you know because body size, shape, all of that stuff is not a thing on our retreats. What you're wearing is not a thing. Come in your
No.
PJs, come in your onesie. Do you know what I mean? Nip out and have a fag halfway through if you need to.
Mm.
Like, that's not how most spaces are set up,
Yeah, it's true.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it was a really different when I came to your retreats or have been to your retreats. It has been a really different experience. And I know the last one that I came on, I literally just chilled the whole time, which for me, I'm like, when I'm in a retreat space, I'm like, yeah, let's get involved here. I'm going to do the things, I'm going to do the workshop, and I know what I love is there's a lot of variation. So there's time to be in nature, there's time to be in the workshops to learn about the nervous system, to learn about self-limiting beliefs, all of the pieces that you bring in. And then there are group activities. So like Charlie, who I also had on the podcast, I mean, one of her dance learning sessions for me was pivotal in a breakthrough moment in terms of my own expansion. And we have all of these beautiful activities to drop into, and we can sit them out if we don't feel like doing it, right? Which for me was a new experience of being in retreat space.
Yeah.
It was different. I hadn't had the opportunity to watch everyone else go out on a nature walk, and me to be able to say, but actually what will serve me now is just to not go and do that nature walk. I want to just lay here on the sofa and chill. And I did it, and it was beautiful.
Well, one of the core things of holding trauma informed space is that you give people choice. It can't be if you don't have choice, it can't be trauma informed, because how can it be?
So interesting. When I compare that to lots of the trainings that I've been in,
it's one of the core tenets of trauma-informed care is that you're offering people, would you like to do this or none of that? You know, that that's the space that I want to create, because I'm not always in the mood for doing all the things. Sometimes I just want to lie on the sofa and do nothing and just stare into space. But that can be the most healing thing in that moment, because that person might just need to integrate what happened in the group this morning, you know. And actually, weirdly, when you give people choice, most people come.
Yeah.
You know, but they have the opportunity to sit it out. Some people have mad, you know, really full on social anxiety, and even sitting in that circle can be so overwhelming for them. And you need to give those people an opportunity to do what is right for them, you know. That's how it's always felt. It feels kind to me that it's
absolutely.
like that.
Yeah, one of the other things that I absolutely love about your spaces is the diversity in terms of age, ethnicity, I imagine gender, or in, you know, like gender preference in terms of sexuality. I mean, I'm queer and I was there. You know, there's just such an open and expansive feel to it, which is really different to a lot of retreat spaces that I've been in, which tend to be quite white centric, especially in the yoga space. They can be quite one-dimensional. So yeah, I appreciate that about your spaces.
Yeah, I think we had an 18-year-old and a 78-year-old on the same retreat. Yeah, it was someone's daughter. And I love when mothers and daughters come. That's really that happens a lot, and siblings, and you know, on the same retreat. So age-wise, there's no one demographic really.
Yeah.
And in all of the ways. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, really making a difference there. I love that. So I'm kind of curious, do you have a plan that you work to where you're kind of progressing and you're thinking this thing's next, or how do you maneuver through the course of your life?
Yeah, I do. I am now a planner, so I know what's happening into the middle of next year. You know, I map out when I would like this to happen. I mean, we're running 7 retreats a year, so that needs planning. Yeah. And you know, you need to book in the slot at the retreat center, or you know, we're doing slightly different events this year as well. So yeah, I map all of that out. Like, when is that happening? The most important thing I map out is when I want a break.
Yes.
Which is every summer. I don't want to work. June, July, August, I don't want to be running big events. It's not, I think
you're good.
Yeah. So I look at, when do I want to factor in rest?
Yeah.
When do the events need to happen? There's sort of a pattern to them now. You know, we do four between January and May, and we do 3 between September and December. That's the pattern. Then everything else I map out. I do map it out, but like what want to happen. And it not in a kind of, in fact, I just get very clear direction, Claire, about what is next.
Yes.
You know, like I know that sounds a bit woo, but like I spend a lot of time just asking what is next, you know, like what is next? Not from my own head, but from something greater than me. And I always get told. And I'm like, oh, really? Do I have to do this?
Oh, feel you in that one. Totally. Yeah.
Like, really? And then so sometimes I'll get like a real intuitive, well, you need to run this course, you know, do an online course, and I'll just set that up, and it'll have that stuff happens quite quickly sometimes.
Yeah, when
So
you
I
get
mean,
the
there's
intuitive hit.
intuition.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's intuition in amongst all of that. But I am a planner. I set monthly, quarterly, annually kind of goals. I work within that framework of this is what is going to happen. I'm not like, oh, this is what I want to happen. It's like, this is what is happening. That's how I approach it.
Beautiful. Really
Yeah.
decisive. Yeah.
Yeah, like, because it's the right order of things. It feels like that in my head, you know?
Yeah.
It's like not
It's
up
really
for debate. It's like,
intentional,
this
isn't
is,
it? Yeah.
yeah. And I think more of us, um like, if we got into like setting intentions every month, it's so encouraging, because you're like, oh, that happened, that happened. You know, like I set an intention last year that I wanted to go to Australia, and I'd never been that far on a plane, and that was a really big deal for me, and I had no idea at the time how that was going to happen. Financially, didn't know how it was going to happen, childcare wise, all of the things. And like, you know, these big things that I've been like, I really want to do that. They've happened because I don't know why, because there's a magic in that process, actually. That's why.
Yeah, definitely. I do feel intention is that, even there were so many things where I'll say, oh, I really want to do this thing. And then within a couple of days, the opportunity will come along. So I do think intention is such an incredible tool.
Yeah. So I am a planner. If you saw my little office, you'd be like, oh, yeah, she's got this shit mapped right out.
Is it like, it's like completely the Matrix up on the wall? Yeah, I can imagine it's like CSI, the screens. I love it.
Yeah.
Love it. So tell us a bit more about how people can access your retreat spaces, for instance, or working with you one-to-one. I'd love
Oh
to
yeah, I
give
mean,
people
one-to-one,
insight.
you can just reach out to me and talk to me about how my work might support you. I work with women that have been through a lot, and usually a lot of the women that come to me have a trauma history and have done quite a lot of work on themselves already, but are still struggling to feel okay about themselves on a daily basis, you know. And so the work I do is around self-belief and self-worth, but also around tolerating our emotional world and allowing ourselves to feel what needs to be felt, because we are so expert, especially women in recovery, at suppressing what we're feeling and not feeling what needs to be felt, because we don't know how to do that. And so much of what we do in sessions is just being it's just me holding the space for people to really be honest about how they are really truly feeling, like how are you actually, and then to not block that with some kind of a behavior or a protective, like, just to, okay, how can we just go there a little bit in the safest possible way, so that, you know, because we're all trying to avoid feeling anxious and stress. Anxiety and stress are the right fucking response to 99% of the things. Yeah, they're the right response, but we're like, oh no, I feel anxious, I feel stressed, and then we block ourselves physiologically from being able to go through that wave of emotion, which would actually has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So and then so I'm fascinated with like emotional intelligence, with, you know, the cognitive part of it, and then, you know, really just taking care of our body in the process, because and doing that in a way that feels really safe and really titrated, because that feels really important to me.
And for those, so I understand titration is like the contraction, the expansion, right?
Well,
So
it's doing it
tell me a
really
bit more about the
gently.
titration, because I'm wondering if there might be some listeners who don't understand that terminology.
Oh yeah, so like if you can't take a nervous system that has been in survival, you can't take it, you can't go faster than the slowest part of your nervous system, and the
Yeah.
nervous system is slow. So you cannot, because it will just contract. So you cannot force, like you can't force the body to hold more joy than it can handle, or more love than it's been used to, in a big way. It's not actually, I don't believe it's physiologically possible. So like the heart will open a tiny little bit. It's called sipping. You sip like a little tiny sip of what is that felt experience of safety. So it's, yes, it's like little tiny weeny rewiring adjustments in the nervous system. That's
Yeah.
what's worked for me. As soon as someone tries to do anything big with me, I'm like, I'm out.
Yeah.
It's just not happening. So I've had to learn to do that with my own self. So that's the way that I support other people. So it is a very gentle, yeah, it's a gentle experience.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Lovely. Yeah, I'm just thinking about some of the times where I've had these huge explosions of growth in an experience, and then there has been inevitably quite a large contraction after. And I think the sipping approach, as you detailed it, it does allow us to just incrementally grow and
Yeah.
meet that edge, meet that edge, meet that edge. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And the
Yeah.
contraction's really important, to not
It's
judge
so
that either.
important.
Do you know
Yeah,
what I mean? Like it's okay if you want to retreat and that feels off to you. Like
yeah.
that's the right response. Trust what your
So true.
innate responses are. Don't judge
Absolutely. We
them.
make our stress, we make our anxiety mean something so terrible about ourselves,
Yeah.
rather than understanding it's a natural response to a system that we live in, to the world that we live in, to the environment that we're exposed to. So,
Yeah. And we
yeah.
judge ourselves for being sad when sadness is the right
Oh,
response,
I know. Yeah, yeah,
It's like,
yeah,
yeah, of course you're fucking sad. It's terrible. It's a sad situation.
yeah, yeah.
Like let's not judge it. Let's just, like, how do we allow ourselves to
Mm,
go through what is a natural grieving process? How
yeah,
do we allow that?
yeah. Finding compassion for self, right? Regardless of the feeling. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So I guess we'll start wrapping it up. I mean, I'm curious. They can work with you one-to-one, individuals that might be listening. You have 7 retreats that are taking place next year. How can we direct people to find out more about these retreat offerings? Where's your
Oh, so my website is just karenmariejohnston.com. So there's a retreat
right?
page there. There's everything's on there. So all the training that I do, all the supervision, all the consultancy,
Amazing.
there's a page on my website for all of it. I'm on Instagram banging on quite a lot about various social justice stuff. I more do that over there. And then I've got a Facebook group called the Self-Love Recovery Hub, which has women from all different backgrounds in who just want to have a better relationship with themselves. And I post resources in there, and I talk in there about what's coming up. And yeah, but the best way is to get onto my email list, really. So then when the retreats come out, because they're pretty much fully booked until next year, so
Amazing.
the next ones that come out will be next summer. But if you want to hear about those, that's the best way.
Great. And I'm going to hyperlink all of those pieces in the bio for this episode. So yeah, or reach out to myself or Karen if you can't find any of those. So I like to wrap up the episode with, like, I'm finding we have two, no, not just two, but there are a variety of listeners. Some of them are coming with prior and current experience of holding space. And others are coming as a listener, somebody who might be embarking upon a transformative journey or continuing their own transformative journey. So let me pose you a question. If you were to be asked what nugget of wisdom you could share with somebody who's moving through their own personal journey of healing, what might you like to share with them?
I don't actually know. That's the
Yeah, I'll put
truth.
you on the spot there.
No, but I don't think there is. Do you know what I mean? I think everyone is so individual, and
Mm,
that, yeah, and trust that if you don't like something, trust that. Like, don't
mm,
judge it. If you do like it, trust that. And that the pathways that we put together are supposed to be really unique. And so I don't have the answer for anyone else. Actually, I don't.
love it.
I
And does
don't
the
have
same
that.
apply for individuals who are holding space, who want to facilitate?
I do think good mentorship's important.
Yeah.
I do think go and look at people who are doing it in a way that you would like to do it, and get mentorship from them. Just because the sort of the whole thing of running any sort of business or any sort of community in the online space is it's
So
a
tricky.
tricky world. It's very tricky. Because I've come from working face to face and being out on the street with people, and they're like, it's so much more straightforward
Yeah.
than this online world that, so many of us have to try and navigate, because ultimately everyone's online and you have to
Mm,
find your people online. And I think a lot of really incredible healers and space holders really struggle with the whole, how do I talk about my work?
yes.
How do I talk about it in a way that draws the right people to me? So that I've had really good mentorship around that. And
Mm,
I supervise other people who are, looking at transitioning from, quite often, teachers, social workers, nurses, other people who've worked in that kind of field, into a more online business space, because I understand what a fucking nightmare it is and can be.
Even if it's something as simple as trying to disseminate a really potent message into 90 seconds.
Oh, it's just
Sometimes I start and I'm
horrible.
like, I just give up. I'm just
It's
not going to say
horrible.
that. It's horrible. It's
It's
so,
horrible, and people always say to me, "Oh, you show up so authentically." It's like, because I
mm,
don't fucking understand the rules of this. You know what I
mm,
mean? I'm just being myself, because who knows what these rules are, and I've never really kind of subscribed to it. So,
mm.
yeah, I do that, but like, what's the alternative? Like, pretending to be an online business, like, it's like,
Yeah,
what even is that?
yeah,
So yeah, I think just I have so many people that are like, what is this world?
mm,
Help me
yeah,
navigate this in a way that feels like it has integrity and congruence,
mm,
because
yeah.
marketing is a whole fucking thing, isn't
It
it?
is a whole thing. Yeah, it is a whole thing. And I do love the fact that what I'm feeling more and more is that people are moving more towards wanting authenticity in
Yeah.
what they're receiving online, and that glossy, plasticky side of it, for me at least, I'm noticing in the interactions I'm having with others, it's
Yeah.
starting to diminish. People want that authentic connection as much as we can get it online anyway. I know one
Yeah.
thing I'm hoping selfishly that you are going to do is, we spoke about it and touched about it for space holders, is offer this kind of trauma informed, bringing some of this experience that you have in your
Yeah.
professional field into the field for some of us who are facilitating
Oh, I
that
have
feels
that's
exciting
written,
to me.
Claire. That
Come on, Karen, bring it on. I'm
No,
ready.
that's written. I delivered it to a group the other day. So, if quite often groups will, other
Mm,
people that want to run retreats will say, how do I do that? And I've got a whole
mm.
training program
Let's
written, so
go.
it's written. Yeah, it's there for anyone that
Nice.
would like that, and that comes into like the training and consultancy bit. So
Beautiful.
yeah, it's all there. It's all written.
All right, well, get it out there so I can sign up, woman. Come on. Hint, hint.
Yeah, no, it's there.
Good. Love it.
Yeah,
Love it. Okay, it's been such a pleasure to connect with you and to speak to you. As always, I'm really enjoying getting to know you a little bit more,
you
having
too,
visited
Claire.
your retreat spaces, but actually getting to know you as a human. You're such a delight. I love your authenticity. Yeah, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much, Karen.
Absolutely loved being here with you, Claire. Thank you for having me so much.
Oh, thank you.